Okay, so I'm back again with another revisited tutorial because my younger self couldn't get it right the first time, I guess. I have no excuse this time as well because I learned it originally like not that long ago. So I think I just wasn't hearing things right, or well, there's a couple of little sections in this where it's like a little grouping of notes, and yeah, I was just confused. But hopefully I've got it right this time though. Hopefully. Otherwise I'm gonna have to do another video like this in 4 years' time. But this is of course the in the round solo that Steve would do just before Gods of War. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do it in two parts. Either two separate videos or just like two parts to this video. I'm going to show you how to play the first part, which is basically what's shown on like the concert release, you know, on the DVD or video. Some of you may or may not know that that's actually an edited down version of like what Steve would play on the Hysteria tour. He actually does a lot of stuff after that as well. So I'm going to show that in the second part because some of you might only be aware of this part here. So like my photograph tutorial, I've written up my own tab and I'll put a link where you can download it. And I'll go through it line by line at a slow and moderate pace. I'll show you fingerings, you know, left hand stuff, right hand stuff. I'll explain some of the symbols I'm using and maybe give you some variations as well. And then I'll play the whole thing together at like a slow, moderate pace. And then I think I'll play the whole thing like I'll try and imitate the way Steve would play it. I was going to like upload the clip of the concert, but I think I've noticed that there's not many Gods of War in the round stuff on YouTube at the moment. And I think my live cover has only just been unblocked, so I don't want to tempt anything. I'll just play it myself. And then afterwards, I'll go over the effects and that I'm using, maybe give you some tips about that. And I'll maybe say a couple of things about the solo itself. But I'll do that after I give you the main chunk of the tutorial. So, let's crack on with it. Okay, so let's take a look at line 1. I'll play it through at like a moderate pace so we can hear what it sounds like. Should be something like this. Okay, so we're starting off with a D chord there. It's just basically like your normal D major chord, but without the high E in there. You may have noticed I've not put in where to do like the whammy bar depresses. I think that should be pretty self-explanatory way to put them in. But also I didn't want to discourage people who don't have a whammy bar. Because basically, you know, of course it helps to have one to play this, but you know, I wouldn't discourage someone who didn't have one not to give this a go. I'm sure you can find your own kind of creative ways to get about that. Not that I could suggest any, because I'm just I don't have a guitar without a whammy bar on it, you know. But I'm sure you can find your own way. So the next three notes after that, we're going to fret them like this. First finger on the second fret, third finger on the fourth fret. Now the way I number my fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty self-explanatory, huh? So you notice when we get to that second fourth note, there's a little arrow going up and an arrow going down. This basically tells us to bend and release this note. And the little fraction above that tells us how much we're going to bend this by. In this case, half a tone, a semitone. So we're going to make that fourth fret sound like the fifth fret. So something like this. Now, when you're bending, you want to kind of have as many fingers behind your bending fingers as possible. It just makes it a little bit easier for you. So in this case, bending with your third finger is fine. And you can bend with your second finger, I think that's alright. But try not to bend with your third finger like this anyway. Of course, there's situations where you're playing lead stuff where you can bend with your first finger, but more so in a downward motion, you know. You notice as well when I'm bending, my thumb kind of protrudes over the neck, kind of helps me, what's the word? I feel I squeeze the neck when I bend. I think that helps. So after that, we've got a group of 4 notes under an arcing line. This is a legato line. Legato is a fancy Italian musical term meaning to play it smoothly, and translated into guitar terms, it means we don't pick every note, we just pick the first one. So to get around that, we're going to use what's known as hammer-ons and pull-offs. So this next little phrase should be something like this. So we're going to pick that second fret, the G, hammer on with our third finger to the fourth fret, pull off back to the second fret. Notice when I'm pulling off there, look at the motion of my finger. I'm pulling off in a downward motion. I'm pulling it down, you know. Yeah, I'm not just lifting off the fret there. Pulling it down gives you a clearer sounding note there. And we're going to do the same again from the second fret to the open. Then after that, we're hitting the fourth fret of the D and then open of the G. And after that, while we're hitting the open fret of the G, move our third finger down to the fourth fret of the A. The little line going up the way is a slide up to the fifth fret, so we don't pick that fifth fret, we just slide up. Then again, open of the G, back to that D chord. Now, this little phrase, so the legato part, and then basically that little slide of the 4/5, this was the little part I wasn't quite getting right. Because up to speed, it's quite a cluster of notes in there, you know. I mean, I knew what was going on. I knew there was a couple of open notes in there and there was a slide, but I just couldn't quite distinguish exactly what was happening. I think I've got it now. But it's quite a tricky thing to play. So maybe a little tip on how you can kind of build up the muscle memory for that. I think it's equally as important to know in your head exactly what's going on, and that kind of helps with your fingers build up the muscle memory. So if I was to kind of try and get this up to speed, I would start playing it slow, but I'd do this thing where I'd repeat a little bit, and then after every repeat I'd add the next note on, and so on and so on. And this kind of, I always feel this quickens the muscle memory build up. So if I start with like the 2/4/4 bend, and then repeat that and add every note afterwards, it should be something like this, and I think this really helps. You know, something like that. If you find you're not quite getting that little quick lick there, start slow, build up in that kind of fashion, and then soon you won't be fighting against your fingers to play up to speed. Okay, now after we play that second D chord, we have these group of 7 notes all bracketed, and above it we have harm with a little dot. Little dot indicating that this is an abbreviation of the word harmonics. So these are natural harmonics. Now you can find these all over the fretboard, but the main ones you come across are the ones on the 12th fret, 7th and 5th. So in this case we're playing them on the 7th fret of the D, G and B. Now the best way to kind of ring out a harmonic clearly is take the fret you're on, then go to the bit of metal just above it. That's actually the fret wire, I should say. That's where you're going to get the cleanest sounding harmonic, and you're just lightly touching the string there. Notice I moved down a bit on the fret, it's not as clean, so... This kind of brings out another point. I think a lot of guitar playing is about muting the strings you're not playing as well. So in this instance, when I'm playing that harmonics there, I've got my thumb protruding over. This is kind of muting the low E and A strings. And normally when I play, my palm rests on those strings anyway. The kind of flesh of my fingers down here are muting the E string. And on my right hand, I tend to like rest my pinky on the E string as well. I mean, if I knew how to finger pick, that'd be pretty handy, but I'm not that good, so it's there for muting purposes. So this kind of helps me just ring out those harmonics clearly, you know? So if you find you're playing stuff, whether it's harmonics or anything, and notes are jumping out you don't want to, just try and think about the muting techniques of your right hand and your left hand as well, because I think that really helps. Okay, if we move on to line 2, the first half, or first 3 chords, is basically the same, so I won't go over that again. And then the last part, we've got harmonics again, and this time we're moving to the 5th fret of the G. And just playing it like that. I like to use my middle finger most of the time for the harmonics, and I feel I can bar over a few strings with that finger quite easily. In fact, what I'll do, I'll play lines 1 and 2 together at a medium pace, so you can hear them both. Okay, right, line 3, it kind of starts off the same. There's a couple of little variations here. So we start off with the same D chord. This time we're only playing one off the 4th fretted G notes before we bend it. And then on the hammer-on and pull-off bit, the legato, we finish on the 2nd fret of the G instead of moving down to that 4th fret of the D. So that opening part, in fact, I'll play the whole line first and then we'll talk about it. Okay, it should be something like that. So like I said, that kind of first half. So one less of the 4th fretted note. The hammer on pull off, we end on the 2nd fret of the G. Now this next note, I've got an arrow to it. I've called it pedal. This isn't necessarily where you play this note, although you can play it here. It's just to remind me to tell you guys that throughout this piece, Steve uses the open D string as a pedal, basically a sustaining note underneath. It kind of fills out the sound. Now there'll be instances throughout this solo where he'll play it, or I'll play it, and I won't have written it down on the tab because it might change where you play it, you know. I find that I'll play it when it's kind of dying out and I need to have a kind of, I need to fill out the sound a bit more. So let's just remind you there that there'll be instances in this solo where I'll play that open D note, but I might not necessarily write it down. So after that, we're sliding from the 4th fret of the G up to the 11th. When you're doing sliding, you want to look where your destination is. That helps you from not overshooting or undershooting. So I'll play it the line up till there. Okay, then this next part might look a bit tricky, but it's basically a sequence done 3 times. So this first one, we're going to hammer on from 9 to 11, pull off to 9, and then slide down to 7. And the best way to fret that is like how we've been doing it before. First finger on the 9, hammer on with your 3rd finger, pull off, slide down with your 1st finger. Going to do the same again, this time 7, 9, 7, slide down 1 fret to 6. Then we're going to end it with 7, 6, 7, 6. Or just 6, 7, 6. And this brings us on to the next line. So line 3 again at moderate pace, something like this. Line 4 should sound something like this. Okay, so the end of line 3 comes into the start of line 4. We're ending on, it's like the D chord again. I haven't written in the 3rd fret of the B. You could play that, but I've just put it as the open of the D and the 2nd of the G. This next little lick, we're going to finger it the same as we've always done. This time on the 4th fret, we're going to slide up to the 6th with our 3rd finger. And we're doing these little half bends again. The last one we're not releasing, we're just keeping it bent and doing a bit of vibrato. That's what that wiggly line means. Just give it a bit of a wiggle. Next half, stuff we've kind of seen before. We're just using different frets here. This time a big slide up to 14. Now when I get to this 14th note, the vibrato I use is most likely going to be the whammy bar. Okay, because I find, what was I doing there? I think I was muting, once I got up there, I was muting that open D string while I was playing that 14th fret note. And to do that, I was using my 1st finger to mute. Okay, line 5 should be something like this at a moderate pace. Okay, a lot of these things, these little licks are stuff we've done before, we're just doing it on different frets. So we're up to the 14, 16. In fact, this is just an octave above what we've been doing down here, really. So get that 16th fret, bend up a half, releasing it back down. We're doing the same hammer on, pull off slide technique as we're doing on line 3. So 14, 16, 14 down to 12. Then 12, 14, 12 down to 11. 11, 12, 11 down to 7. Bigger slide this time. Then I like to end that by playing the open D with it. So all of that line again at a moderate pace. Cool, right, now we get to line 6. We're starting off with that same kind of chord we ended on line 5. And all the way through at medium pace, it should sound like this. Okay, so for this little lick here, I like to bar my first finger over the 7th fret of the G and B. And then when I get to that 10th fret of the B, I bring in my pinky. I think it helps. I mean, yeah, if you're not comfortable with your pinky, you can use your 3rd finger there. But maybe it helps to try and introduce it on something like this, because it's not asking too much. So we're going back down to the 8th fret. I'm going to fret that with my 2nd finger. Got another little hammer on pull-off technique. But we're going to keep that 7th fret off the G sustained while we do it. So all together. And then we basically do the same again for the second half. This time we end on this little, it's like a C major inversion. And what Steve does, he depresses the whammy bar before he goes into it. And I fret this again with my first finger barring these strings. And you can kind of dive bomb out or slide out. Now if you don't have a whammy bar, if you want to get that effect, you could just slide up to those notes. That was pretty much all of the solo as on the DVD release. I'll play it through at a moderate pace, everything together. It should sound something like this. Okay, something like that. Now, I'll maybe play it up to speed as well, just because I'm a bit wary that sometimes when you slow things down, you might not quite get the groove or the rhythm of certain notes. So I want to play up to speed to see if there's anything I've drastically changed by slowing it down. Just going to tune it up quickly, but I seem okay. I'm going to bring in some delay as well for this, just in case you think it sounds a bit different. So, up to speed, let's go. Okay, hopefully it's something like that. And hopefully this has helped. Like I say, I'm going to cover the rest of the solo in another part. I actually might make it a different video, since it's like quite a long video, this one. But what I'll do now is I'll maybe talk about my effects and maybe say a few things about the solo itself. Right, so maybe just to kind of go over some of the basics of my effects here, and maybe give you a couple of tips on how you can get, not necessarily his sound, but something that would do you, something that's done me well over the years and trying to get close to this kind of sound. So my distortion is, I've got it set to like half gain. Oh, by the way, I'm still using like my old Boss ME50 multi-effects into a Palmer speaker simulator, the little PDI 09. It's called the Junction, and I've got that plugged straight into my interface. So my distortion, I've got it set to half gain, so it's quite clean, but I've got a compressor on it as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'll take the compressor off, and this is what it sounds like without the compressor on. Okay, now I'll put the compressor on, and this is what it sounds like. You may not hear too much of a difference, but there's a lot more sustain on that. And I can't quite explain it, but it kind of makes me feel better when I play as well. It makes certain notes kind of jump out. Now it's quite a processed sound, which kind of suits me fine for the stuff I'm doing. I mean, I'm not a guy who's after like vintage tone, not yet anyway, so I kind of like it. So what the compressor does there, the positives of it is the fact that it helps to sustain. But it also brings up a lot of noise from like everything else, basically, you know, like fretting noise, string noise, cable noise. Because that's what a compressor does. It basically takes a signal, and everything that's quiet and everything that's loud ends up sounding at the same volume. It squeezes everything together. So it has its positives and negatives. So to kind of combat this, I have a noise gate on as well, because, like I say, it's basically amplifying the quiet stuff. So if I was to take the noise gate off, you'd hear all the noise from like my cable and that. So I mean, that's not just cable noise, that's the fact that I'm sitting right next to my computer, and I've got a light on as well. I've got the camera here. I mean, I've got a Bluetooth mouse as well, which isn't great for recording. I switch it off when I record, but I mean, listen to this. I mean, that could probably be cool if you're doing some kind of Steve Stevens effects. So I've got a noise gate on, and that basically just says anything below a certain threshold, we're not going to let through. Now, I also have on some chorus, which sounds like this. In fact, I'll play it without the chorus. This is it with chorus. So here it really thickens up the sound. If I'm just playing a clean tone, that's without chorus, and I'll bring it in. It really thickens up the sound, and I like the sound of chorus. There's a lot of guitarists out there who don't. I don't quite understand that. Like I say, I'm not some sort of purist yet, so it kind of suits me fine. Now the type of chorus I've got on it's a stereo chorus, but my guitar is running in mono. Now I can't quite explain it, but for some reason it just sounds better having a stereo chorus in mono for this purpose anyway. I don't know, I think it makes it sound thicker without being too kind of wishy-washy. Now I've also got a delay on as well. Quite a long delay for this stuff. So I've got that set to like just a couple of repeats. Timing wise, I tap in my tempo. There's a way you can do that on here. If you don't have a way to do that and you're trying to copy like tempos, there's a couple of websites out there where you can, like, it will translate like beats per minute, or you can tap like on a mouse or something, and it will give you the times in milliseconds. So you should check that stuff out if you can only kind of dial in your delay tones in milliseconds. Now, the rack effect that Steve used on the Hysteria tour is quite a famous sought after one. For the delay anyways, the TC Electronic 2290. And there's a couple of features on there, which I don't know if they were unique, but I think helped out. One was that you could put chorus or any kind of a certain type of modulation on the repeats. So what you could do is you could just basically have a dry signal, and then your delay repeated notes would be chorused, which might make things sound a bit clearer. And I also had a feature where it would duck out the delay if you were playing. So you could set the delay repeated volume to be very high, but it wouldn't get in the way if you're playing because it wouldn't sound. And then as soon as you stop playing, it would basically say, oh, we can turn up the volume now, and you'd hear all the delay tones. So that's quite a handy feature. So on this, because I don't have anything like that, I have to be quite wary about the volume of my delay, just so it's not overpowering too much, but when there's gaps, you can hear it nice and clearly. Okay, so I want to say a couple of things about the solo, because I think a lot of us would describe it as epic, and I find that funny because we might have our own subjective opinions on what epic means, but we'd all come to that same conclusion that this is an epic sounding solo. So I want to maybe try and explain why that is for me. I mean, visually it's pretty epic, you've got Steve just being Steve, and I was never really a big fan of the Gibson Firebird, but I gotta say, he makes it look like one cool guitar. Maybe one of the coolest looking guitars. Sorry, Jackie. I'm just joking. But musically, he does a couple of things which I think helps make it epic. So, the majority of the solo is, in fact, all the solo kind of surrounds a D major sound. But what he does, which I think makes it sound epic and sophisticated, is he kind of changes the tonal context of that D major just by using certain notes here. So a lot of the solo, well, the first half is kind of in a D Ionian sound. Now don't worry about that term Ionian, I'm just using it to compare the fact that at the end he goes from an Ionian sound to a Mixolydian sound. These are modes, by the way. Like I say, you don't have to worry about it, just know that he changes the context of that D major sound. So in the first part, we're playing the D major kind of stuff. And on line 1, when we go to that slide from 4 to 5, we're on a C sharp note there. This gives us that D Ionian sound. There's the C sharp. Whereas at the end, the very last part on this on line 6, he goes to that C major triad inversion. This is where it kind of gives us that Mixolydian sound, That's the only difference there. The C major, the C sharp, C natural. So it's not a huge difference, but it's subtle enough that you don't really notice it. But it's effective enough that it does actually change the tonality of the piece there. And he kind of explores that further on in the second part, which I'll get to in part 2. So to try and make this point even clearer, here are the chords for like D Ionian, basically the normal D major. You'd be playing these sorts of chords. If I was to put that in the Pour Some Sugar on Me chorus riff, the D would be the first chord in the sequence. At the end of the solo, he switches to D Mixolydian. D Mixolydian uses these chords, though these are the 3 major chords. Play the Pour Some Sugar on Me progression again. D would become the 3rd chord in that chord sequence. So it's still the same D major chord, but you see it has a different kind of tonal context there. Now what's funny as well is that he actually does hit the C natural note in the first half, but it's that little half bend. So it just kind of quickly passes by. It doesn't heavily land on it. So you might think that that's actually, he's hitting a wrong note in the scale, but it works within the context of what he's doing there. So hopefully I've maybe explained why I think musically this solo's epic. But of course, you probably didn't need me to tell you that to know that's an epic solo anyway. But anyway, I hope this solo tutorial has helped. Part 2 will be coming shortly.